Commander.
Hey, buenas a
Insert
todos.
combustion chamber nitrogen purge,
Vamos
so they
corriendo
use nitrogen
al
inert
primer
gas
lanzamiento de
to flow
cosmonautas
through the combustion chamber and purge any
en
vapors or
2021.
other remnants before they start the full flow of fuel and oxidizer to the
Estamos en
engines.
directo en el canal de
And
la
using a
NASA
refined version of
y
kerosene
quedan
and
menos de
liquid
5
oxygen to
minutos
power
para
all of the
que
stages, all three,
se
first,
produzca
second, and
el
third stages of the
primer
Soyuz
lanzamiento del
rocket.
2021, como ya he dicho, dentro de la Soyuz, que es la nave que va a llevar
Just as a quick reminder, as we
a
get up
3
to the 4-minute mark,
astronautas a la
when we
Estación
launch, the space
Internacional
station will be flying
Espacial.
just over northern Uzbekistan, about 335 miles
Son dos
behind the
cosmonautas
Soyuz
rusos
spacecraft as it leaves the launch pad.
y un
And then by the
cosmonauta
time it makes the
norteamericano.
8-minute, 49-second ride into or 25-minute rendezvous with the space station.
Vamos a ver qué tengo por aquí de Twitter con noticias. Aquí está la página de Roscosmos, la página cosmonauta rusa.
Under 3 minutes and 20
Están ahí
seconds
todos
away,
preparados.
we're
Vemos
awaiting the
aquí
call that the
la plataforma de
boosters' fuel tanks
lanzamiento,
are being
toda la zona de
pressurized for flight.
lanzamiento
This will just help
ya
optimize
preparada.
the flow of all of the fuel to the rocket engines, helps add a little bit of structural support as well to the rocket.
Oxidized and fuel drain and safety valves are closed. Ground filling of oxidized nitrogen to the vehicle is terminated.
Aquí, ahora lo vemos.
At this point, terminating some of the propellant feeds to the
Aquí
rocket.
Twitter, 2 minutos para el lanzamiento.
Two things to keep an eye on as we continue to count down. There are 2 umbilical towers,
A ver, vamos a poner
really those 2
aquí
ground structures attached to the rocket itself.
Soyuz.
That taller one's going to separate at about 35 seconds before launch, and the smaller one about midway up the rocket will separate, and once you see that separate, we're 15 seconds away from launch.
Booster propellant tank pressurization
Tenemos aquí
initiated.
And then once at the pad, there's the call out. The booster tanks are now being pressurized for flight.
Getting
And
the
they'll be
video
taking
cómo
a
han
few
subido
final
los
photos
cosmonautas.
and waving goodbye. Flow of fuel to those officials from Roscosmos first and second stage gathered to fire simultaneously for the head begin the initial flight into orbit up to the top of the Soyuz
Preparar el
rocket 2
tiempo,
minutes
porque
fuel
vamos para el
capsule.
lanzamiento.
This all took place about 2 hours
subían los
ago.
cosmonautas
And since then, the crew has been
rusos
in their seats.
y americano.
Again, Oleg Novitsky is in the center seat. He's the commander of the Soyuz spacecraft. Pyotr Dubrov in the left seat, Mark Van Heye in the right.
Eso se producía hace casi una hora, llevan ahí metidos los cosmonautas. Vemos aquí diferentes imágenes. Cómo levantaron la Soyuz. Bueno, aquí algún patriarca ruso estaba bendiciendo la Soyuz. Un minuto para el lanzamiento.
55 seconds away from launch. We saw Oleg Novitsky there in the center seat. His flight displays
Los
are
motores
configured.
de la Soyuz lleva 5 pedazos de
Vehicle to internal
boosters.
power. Ground propellant feed terminated.
La zona de lanzamiento.
And right at 35 seconds, the first
Todo
umbilical
preparado.
tower separating the
Ahí
vehicle on
vemos a los
internal
astronautas
power.
de dentro.
We'll have auto sequence start.
Este es de hace 6 minutos. No, sí, hace 5 minutos.
So the ground propellant feed to the rocket has now completely terminated.
Auto sequence initiated.
Second umbilical separated, 15 seconds from
Bueno,
launch.
15 seconds, 15 segundos para el lanzamiento.
Second umbilical tower separate.
No sé por qué no sacan ahora la cuenta atrás. Ignition.
And we see booster ignition
Engines
Y
at
ahí va.
maximum thrust.
Cómo se
and
despliega.
liftoff. Soyuz MS-18 on its way to the International Space Station.
Perfecto, ¿no?
10 seconds. The booster parameters are nominal. Everything is good on board.
Hearing nominal performance, the first stage delivering 930,000 pounds of thrust from those 4 first stage boosters and the single core engine.
30 seconds into the flight. The parameters of the booster are nominal. Everything is fine on board. 40 seconds. The vehicle is stable. Everything is good on board.
Continuing to hear good performance calls. A quick look inside the capsule. You can see the crew strapped in and monitoring displays as they continue on their way uphill. Just past the 1 minute mark into flight.
Pitch, yaw, and roll are nominal. 70 seconds into the flight. Everything is nominal. We are good on board.
At this point, the space station had already flown over the Baikonur Cosmodrome and now making its way in front of the Soyuz spacecraft.
It's feeling well.
Roughly 90 seconds into flight, the Soyuz rocket already moving more than 2,100 miles per hour, already about 10 miles downrange.
Vital parameters of the booster are nominal. The crew is feeling well at 10:44, unintelligible. Okay, you received the message about the Peugeot parameters. Copy.
And right on time, we see first stage separation, the Koryoff cross, those 4 strap-on boosters separating. Now the single core stage continuing to power the Soyuz spacecraft into flight.
Copy.
Just before that, the launch escape tower was also jettisoned. Soyuz does maintain escape capability all the way to flight, though, at this stage able to use for a short time small boosters on the shroud itself, and then once the shroud detaches, able to use boosters on the spacecraft.
Se han separado lo que hemos visto, esas lucecitas
So
alrededor,
the
la
shroud
separación de los 4
jettison is
boosters.
confirmed.
Y ahora mismo
We
sigue la
have
Soyuz con uno.
controlled descent.
And so we heard confirmation the launch shroud has jettisoned. In this animation, you can see the Soyuz spacecraft now exposed, continuing under the power of the second stage.
Ahí es donde van los cosmonautas.
180 seconds into the flight. Vehicle stabilization is performing nominally, and the crew is feeling well. Copy.
Second stage is going to continue to fire until 4 minutes and 37 seconds into flight, so about another minute and 20 seconds.
The second stage thrusters are functioning nominally. Everything is good on
Parece
board.
que todo va bajo control. Todo está funcionando bien. Bueno, nos ofrecen unas imágenes desde la Soyuz.
Getting some views from the spacecraft itself as it continues downrange.
Preciosas imágenes.
230 seconds. Vehicle stabilization is performing nominally. Everything is good on board.
At this point, the vehicle's already accelerated to just about 6,400 miles per hour, about 172 miles downrange from the Baikonur Cosmodrome.
Bueno, van a unos 64.000 kilómetros por hora ahora mismo. Bueno, millas por hora.
250 seconds into the flight. Pitch, yaw, and roll are nominal. Everything is good on board.
The pitch, yaw, and roll calls relating to the attitude or which way the vehicle is pointing. Hearing nominal is what we want to continue to hear on the way uphill. Everything continuing to perform normally with the Soyuz spacecraft and the rocket. 4 minutes and 40 seconds into flight.
Todos los parámetros indican que todo va bajo control, todo va bien. Vemos ahí que han hecho una maniobra para...
Second stage separation
Ahí
is
va.
confirmed.
Parte de la segunda etapa,
We had
pero es raro, ha salido solamente un
And so we
cacho.
heard good confirmation. Second stage is shut down and separated. You saw a piece fly off there. That was the lower skirt of the third stage. That was jettisoned right on time as it was supposed to.
Stabilization is performing nominally, and everything is good on board.
Soyuz now being propelled by the single engine of the third stage, providing about 67,000 pounds of thrust. This is going to continue to burn for about 4 minutes. It's going to shut down at 8 minutes and 46 seconds into flight.
Into the flight, the third stage is functioning nominally. Everything is good on board.
Van a seguir encendidos los motores al menos 4 minutos más. ¿Dónde caerá ese
350
cacho?
seconds into the flight,
Ese cacho de booster,
everything
¿dónde
is
caerá?
nominal. Everything is good on board.
En el océano, seguramente. Llevamos 650 segundos.
— 380 seconds into the flight, third stage
Tenemos las
thrusters
imágenes
are
que
functioning
nos siguen
nominally.
llegando
The crew
de
are feeling
la Agencia
well.
Espacial Rusa,
Copy,
Roscosmos y la NASA. Es una misión conjunta, van a la Estación Internacional Espacial. Se van a juntar allí unos cuantos, ¿eh?
400 seconds
Se
into
van a
the
juntar
flight,
unos
the vehicle is
cuantos.
stable. Everything is good on board.
Ya hay 4 en la ISS.
Now just about 2 minutes left, a little under 2 minutes of power
y el
on
22 de
the
abril
third
salen
stage.
otros 4 cosmonautas en la Crew Dragon 2.
Once it shuts down and separates just a few seconds
Vamos,
later,
ese
the Soyuz spacecraft will be
Tuneti.
flying free.
Sí, va Peña
A series
dentro.
of pre-programmed commands will
Van 2
execute,
rusos
deploying a
y
number of
un
the
americano.
appendages, the antennas, and the solar arrays needed to power the spacecraft on its way to the
No
station.
entiendo cómo
And
no
a number
voy
of
a hacer esas
antennas will
imágenes
also
de
deploy
dentro de
for
la Soyuz.
communications and tracking.
La verdad es que
Including
van,
those that will be
vamos, como en un vuelo
responsible
de
for
charter.
communicating with the station as the Soyuz
Van
makes
ahí
its automated rendezvous and
en un
docking.
avioncito, sin vibraciones ni nada. Sale
7.5
todo.
minutes since launch. We have about a minute 20,
Es
a
que no
minute
sé
30
si
left
ellos
until the
notarán
third stage has
vibraciones,
done
sobre
its
todo
job.
al acelerar al
Shut
principio.
down and separate.
Tienen que notar ahí la aceleración, los Gs. A ver, parece que están echando un poco de...
470
Se está
seconds.
moviendo un poco.
Third stage thrusters are functioning nominally.
Now in the final minute of powered flight, the Soyuz 2.1A booster. Coming up soon, we'll see third stage shutdown,
sigue funcionando
separation.
190 seconds into the flight, vehicle stabilization is performing nominally, and everything is good on board.
We'll look to confirm good orbital insertion, essentially
Seconds flight.
confirming that the spacecraft is in the intended altitude, in the intended orbit.
We are ready.
And liftoff.
Pues si no has visto el
Now
lanzamiento
standing by for
tú,
third stage
mira, voy a
separation,
poner aquí,
shutdown and separation.
520 seconds into the flight.
bueno, la pongo por aquí. Bueno, la separación, ahora lo vemos perfectamente. ¿Cómo se separa el último booster?
Orbit insertion is confirmed. Our congratulations, and now Moscow, MCC Moscow will talk to you. Kazbeki Moscow.
Más está despegando las aletas térmicas. Está desplegando las aletas térmicas.
Kazbeki
A ver,
Moscow.
a ver, a ver, a ver. Qué guapo esto. Rafa Velasco, papá.
And so we saw
Tenemos que verlo hasta que
good
llegue.
shutdown and separation of the third stage.
Pues tardan bastante en llegar, no,
Solar
no
array
cortaremos
has
antes.
deployed, standing by for
Pero
confirmation
esto
that
está
all
súper chulo.
antennas have
Han
deployed.
desplegado las aletas térmicas estas. Qué chulo. Se puede apreciar un pelín la curvatura de la Tierra.
Kazbeki
Esto
Moscow.
para los
Copy.
negacionistas.
Kazbeki MCC Moscow.
Voy a
This is
poner
Kazbek
aquí
2.
lo que iba a poner
I am
antes.
ready to provide the data as per page 36. Kazbeki, how was
Bueno,
the
perdemos conexión.
Moscow.
Bueno, así
How
podemos
did you
ver.
copy? I copy you loud and clear. Kazbek, how do you copy us? We copy you 5 by 5. I am ready to give you data as per stage 36.
De
Yes,
nuevo el
we are standing
lanzamiento.
by for the first measurement data from you. So we are
And
receiving the
liftoff.
image right now.
Soyuz MS-18
Copy.
on its way to the International Space Station.
So 10 seconds. To
Ese era el lanzamiento.
yes, there
Nada
parameters
precisa.
are the nominal. Everything is good on board.
Desde ahí arriba, que si no se ve al carnero,
First
se
stage
ve todo.
delivering 930,000
Pero bueno,
pounds.
lo han lanzado desde
Time,
Kazajistán, así que no, el carnero queda un poco
time,
lejos.
yes, it is confirmed. Kazbek, you are standing by for the first measurement from you. Give the first measurement at the time 10:52:28. The SAP pressure 801, BO pressure 8. The SAP pressure 801, BO pressure 823. In PO
Vemos
pressure
en Twitter las
891. In the
Esto es lo que
instrument
ha
compartment,
salido
and I'm
volando,
ready
estos
to
cachos por
give
aquí
you
volando
the
que han
data
salido.
from number 3. Go
Esta
ahead.
imagen del cosmódromo.
17, 17.7, 18, 17.3, 19,
Roscosmos.
272, number 20,
Qué guapo.
0.8, 21, 1.2, 22, 325,
Están
23,
están jugando al bingo ahora.
24, 16.9, 25,
Línea.
17.5, 26, 272. Propellant is 880. Copy Kazbek 2. Now please
Правильно,
check
правильно.
the indicators in work.
Хорошо, хорошо. Очень хорошо.
And so we're continuing to get a lot of comms between the Soyuz spacecraft and the Russian Mission Control Center in Koryov,
Que me
hearing
avisen
them
por
call Kazbek. That
Twitter.
is the call sign for the Soyuz spacecraft with Commander Oleg Novitsky.
Estos son
We
los
did hear
cosmonautas.
a good confirmation of all solar arrays, both solar arrays and all of the appendages, so all of the antennas did deploy successfully. So we had
Los
a
rusos
nominal
y el
flight on the
americano
way
ahí en
uphill.
medio.
And we had a
Eran
good
bajitos,
orbital insertion, the
Según los he
initial
visto
orbit
acercándose
for
a
the
la
Soyuz
Soyuz,
spacecraft
los
today
tíos
is
eran
rated
bastante
around
bajitos.
200 kilometers
Así
by
ocupan menos espacio, pesan
242
menos, que los
kilometers,
kilos
or about
son
124 by
millones de euros.
150 miles.
Get ready for the recording.
Значит, переключение секции баков КДУ.
So the KDU manifold switchover will be after the first burn.
A ver si entiendo algo con mi
Maneuver.
ruso.
Это по
At
Nivel
stage
super
42,
básico.
you have the time recorded.
Estamos en el centro de control de la misión rusa.
Copy. Stage 42.
La verdad es que no sé cuánto tarda en llegar a la ISS, pero
40 is the time, yes, correct, of the switchover. And after the tank
pero
switchover,
puede que
by
una
serial,
hora o así, en
there will
menos
be
de una hora.
selection of the first manifold depot.
Estén por allí cerca ya.
So, and
Están a
what
400
stage
y
of the
pico
procedure
kilómetros.
is that,
Los
Moscow?
Starlink cuando los lanzan en 20 minutos están a casi 300 kilómetros de altura, o sea que
первый коллектор.
So the first manifold will be selected before the rendezvous. Copy.
no sé cuánto tardan, pero poquito. A ver, voy a buscarlo.
Затем Т0,
Then T0,
работа первого автономного сближения.
so the first automated rendezvous. And page 45, the IKV inhibit 12:10:00. It is also recorded. Copy. Page 45, 12:10:00. It's IKV inhibit. Yes, that's correct. Now, compass
Mira,
of the
3
second
horas
orbit
y
12,
unas 3
14
horas
is the time. Copy.
tardan en
12,
llegar a la estación
14
internacional.
second
Claro, y a
compass.
acoplarse y tal,
That's correct.
podrían llegar en
From
menos
input
tiempo
2, you
seguro,
will have,
pero bueno, van
to
haciendo
activate,
sus
display
trazados, no
TV,
van ahí en línea recta,
before the
van
compass.
haciendo órbita alrededor de la Tierra hasta que llegan a ella.
So the command that should be sent is GE3.
Pues en 3
Yes,
horas se pretende
display
llegar.
relay is GE3 command, and you will have to activate the COM assets from the panel. Yes, that's correct.
Так, ну пока на этом все.
So that's all I had for now.
Para acá es adiós. Me ha dicho algo de para acá.
Copy.
Sí, unas 3 horas. Bueno, no voy a estar 3 horas aquí, ¿eh? Luego cuando vayan a llegar
Ждем от
con
вас
esto otra
5-минутный
vez.
замер.
And we're standing by to get the results of the 5
Las
minutes.
Britania.
Яков-2 готов передать 5-минутный замер.
This is Kazbek 2. I'm ready to report.
Bueno, pues en mi ruso es básico y encima se oye así con estas interferencias. Me entero de nada.
Say again.
Давление ПО
PO.
822,
Pressure 822.
ПО 890.
The pressure is.
Con Madrid-Zaragoza. 3 horas, ¿no? Sí.
How did you copy?
Pues decían en el Trastor, decía que... Sí,
Давление ВСА
decía que
801.
si las Starship la dedicaran también a llevar a pasajeros, en 5 minutos podías estar entre Nueva York y Madrid.
Pressure is
En minutos, en 5 minutos.
800.
Vas ahí a 30.000 kilómetros por hora. Lo que pasa es que la maniobra de suicida y tal, ahí dentro, menuda cojones. Bueno, pues lo mismo me conecto. Porque tengo que hacer la comida, sí, yo.
Казбек, это по Москве.
Pero bueno, luego con esto, si cuando vayan a llegar,
Корабль выведен
en un par de horitas,
спутника Земли.
me conecto otra vez, seguro.
Раскрыты.
Inserted
¡Hala!
into the orbit.
Nos vemos luego. Espero que se haya oído bien, porque el otro día no se me oía muy bien.
Deployed your cargo to open
¡Hala, hasta luego! Vaya día de perros que está haciendo aquí lloviendo.
shoulder straps and the
Tunetti, ¿cómo hace allí en los Pirineos?
control sensors. Copy. Pressure helmets to open and we're going to release the straps and activate the thermal control sensors. The vehicle insertion complete. Guys, this is Solovyev. How do you read me? Well, first of all, I'd like to congratulate you on this
Хорошо,
successful
хорошо.
vehicle orbital insertion. All the telemetry parameters are nominal, and other than that, everything is fine. So you're going
desayunar.
to
Aquí estoy yo desayunando.
proceed with all the work that you have to do. Copy all. It's in work.
Яков-1.
This is Kazbek 1. Thermal control sensor deactivated, and helmets are now open. Copy.
Казбек, текущий сеанс
Казбек.
заканчивается 11.
Nublado también.
Compass will be
Aquí igual.
over at 11:03.
Ayer quería haber hecho un directo porque se iban a ver 2 satélites que nunca había visto.
11:03.
Pero nada, igual. Todavía no hay nubes por la noche. Nada. Todavía no llueve allí. Ya, como llueve allí se va toda la nieve. Aquí se está cayendo ya. Pues lo mismo, lo dejo esto aquí en directo. Si alguien se mete luego...
All right, so we've been hearing a
Aquí
lot
está
of
en
chatter
directo.
between the Soyuz MS-18 spacecraft and the Russian Mission Control Center in Korea
Vaya horas.
and the
Bueno,
crew
son buenas
safely
horas
on
estas.
orbit. The Soyuz spacecraft deployed all of its solar arrays and antennas following a flawless flight uphill. We do have a little bit of time. We should be getting some launch replays pretty soon. So in the meantime, we'll take some more Ask NASA questions. This first one's asking how long are these astronauts going to stay on board the International Space Station?
Que van a llegar a
Well,
la
most
ISS.
flights typically last about 6 months. As of right now, these three currently plan to stay about 6 months, a little more than 6 months on board the International Space Station. And that's a typical stay. The spacecraft itself has an on-orbit lifetime of about 200 days. So that's typically a max that a crew will stay on board the International Space Station. Obviously, you have the capability to sometimes swap seats, depending on how the flights downhill or down the schedule will take place. But for right now, these crew members scheduled to spend about 6 months on board
De
the
los
station.
cosmonautas rusos. Aquí
This
se
next
ve un
question
poco
asks,
mejor
why
que el
does the
americano.
Dragon journey take more time than the Soyuz? That's a great question. And a lot of it comes down to the difficulties that come with orbital
Estos
mechanics.
son los tres que han ido para
You
allá.
have to launch at very precise
Y
times
si
to make
no me
journeys
equivoco,
like
hay
the
otros
one we're
4
seeing
ahora
today.
mismo en la estación. Hay
And it's
2
only been
americanos,
possible through
un
years
ruso
of
y
evolution
un japonés.
and a lot of lessons learned on behalf of the Russian
Al
rocket
japonés
scientists and
le
the flight
sigo en
planners.
Twitter.
Typically,
Bueno, le
for many
siguen
years, the Soyuz took
700.000
about 2
personas
days
porque va poniendo
to
fotos
arrive at the
de
International
todos los
Space
sitios donde van
Station,
pasando desde la estación
and if they're
internacional tal, el tío va
they have
haciendo
any
fotos
issues with any of
y
their
las va
burns
subiendo
or
a
their
Twitter.
engine firings on the way
Y
to
las
the space station
ven miles y
today,
miles,
they
cientos de
would
miles de
default
personas
into
todos
what
los
is
días.
a 34-orbit
De
rendezvous,
Madrid
which
también,
takes
hay
about 2
algunas
days to
acá.
get there. So it really just comes down to really
A ver.
understanding the capabilities of the spacecraft.
¿Cómo se
And
llama
once
el
you
tío?
get
Buah,
that,
es que
you
tiene un
can
nombre
try
japonés.
to narrow down. There are also a lot of other things that come into play when you plot out how long it's going to take
A
you to
ver,
get there.
seguro que si pongo japonés.
Typically, the shortest that a Dragon spacecraft will be able to make it to the space station is going to be about 6 to 8 hours right now, but again, has to be at a very specific time at the space station at a very specific place.
Bueno,
And
es
if it's any longer
es
than
el
that, we'll
Japo.
typically extend that out just to make sure
A
that the
ver,
crew
¿cómo se
has
llama?
time to
Eso,
sleep,
Soichi
and we're
Noguchi.
not trying to
Soichi
keep them
Noguchi.
up for 12 to 14
Soichi
hours straight
Noguchi.
before they try to dock a spacecraft to the space station. All right, this next one asks, how do you make oxygen on the
este es.
space station? That's a great question. I mentioned that a little bit earlier, that we're able to recycle a lot
726.500
of the
followers.
life support
El tío.
systems. We make
va poniendo
oxygen
fotos.
through a process called electrolysis, and that's where
Lo
you
estáis viendo, ¿no?
basically take a
sí.
water molecule and
Y el
you
tío va
split it.
poniendo
You use
fotos
electricity and
de
you
por dónde
separate it into its
va la
parts.
ISS.
Water is made up of hydrogen
Canadian
and
Rockies, no
oxygen,
sé qué.
H2O. And you can either
Ah,
take
mira,
that
también hace
excess
fotos.
hydrogen
Guau,
and vent
qué
it
guapo.
off board, or
A la luna,
you can put it through a
una
different
aurora
process.
boreal
We have a
y
technology
Júpiter
demonstration
ahí.
on board called Sabatier, which
Madre
takes
mía.
the
La
excess
luna está un
hydrogen
poco ahí
from when we make
desenfocada
oxygen
con
by
el brillo.
separating the water molecules, and you combine it
Y un
with
volcán, a
CO2,
saber dónde
carbon
es.
dioxide that gets scrubbed out of the air that the astronauts are
Roma,
exhaling.
Italia.
And if you take that excess
El otro día se
hydrogen
veía
and
Madrid.
combine it with CO2, you can
Sacó
make more
Madrid, se veía el
H2O.
aeropuerto,
So the
el
goal is
Wanda
to
como un
eventually
donuts, como
get
una
to a point
rosquilla
where you
así,
have what's called a closed
glaseada.
loop life support system, where you're able to just kind of constantly cycle
Pues el tío va
through
poniendo fotos
all of your
increíbles,
breathing
¿no?
gases, all of your water that you're launching, so
De
you
por
don't
donde
have
va
to launch a
pasando
bunch of
la
reserves.
ISS.
We're still perfecting a lot of those technologies.
Pues eso,
It's really
es
why
un
the
japonés,
International
un
Space Station
ruso
is so
y dos
important,
americanos.
because we can do that
Ahora llega otro
250
americano y dos
miles
rusos,
above
o
our
sea que ya van a
heads, and really
ser
make sure that we understand those technologies
igual de
very
rusos que de
well before
americanos.
we start sending crew members to the moon and eventually onto Mars, where when you're going to Mars, you're talking about a 3-year round trip, and you have to make absolute sure that all of those systems are going to work.
Y eso, y hay y el japonés este.
Our next question asks, which docking port
Y
on the
dentro de
space
unos días,
station
el
are they going
22
to
de
dock to?
abril,
They
creo
are
que
headed for the
salen.
Rossviet module. It's also known as Mini Research Module Number
Eran
1.
otros dos
And
americanos,
it's on
un
the
europeo que creo que
Earth-facing
es
side
francés
of the
y
Zarya
un ruso.
Functional Cargo
Más.
Block module on the Russian segment.
Pero
And it's
volverá,
the only
volverá
one
alguno de los que
open
está allí, claro. No
on
se
the
van a
space
juntar
station right now. You
allí
can see what it's going to
7
look
más
like a little
4,
bit later
11
this
personas.
morning.
Bueno,
The
podrían
Soyuz
estar hasta
MS-18 with
13,
the
creo que
arrow
es el
there.
máximo.
It's not there yet, but that's what it's going to look like, and that's the Rossviet port
12 o
that you
13
can see
será
it
el máximo
attached
que
to.
pueden estar allí a la vez.
Our
Para
next
poder
question
estar
comes
a
from
gusto y
Shane.
bien.
I want to know, how fast are they traveling roughly
Soichi
right now?
Noguchi.
So right now they're traveling at about 17,000 miles an hour, a little bit over, but they're essentially going orbital velocity. They'll start out at about 16,700 miles an hour or so, and then they'll continue to increase their speed through a series of what's called delta velocity burns. By increasing their speed, they're able to raise their orbit until they're roughly on the exact same orbital height and trajectory as the International Space Station, which itself is about 260 miles over the Earth right now. By that point, they'll be traveling closer to about 17,500 miles an hour. Our next question is, who will then be the next ISS commander? Who's the next space station commander?
Bueno,
That's a
recordar.
great question. So right now on board
Bueno, voy a dejar
the
aquí.
space station, it's Sergei Ryzhikov. He's actually going to hand off command
Y yo desaparezco.
to Shannon Walker, one of the Crew 1 astronauts, just about a week from
Okay.
now, just before he comes home, along with Sergei Kuchverkov and Kate Rubins. And so he's going to be handing off to Shannon Walker. She's on the right side of this picture in the front row. And she'll be the commander for a couple of days until the Crew 2 mission launches to the space station, at which point she will be handing off to Aki Hoshide from the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, and then he'll be the commander for several months during Expedition 65. And then towards the end of that flight, he'll hand off to Thomas Pesquet of the European Space Agency, who will be the commander for a couple of weeks at the very end of their mission. All right, our next question asked, why do Russian rockets launch from Kazakhstan? That's a great question, and it goes back to the very beginning of the Russian space program, the very early days when the space program was starting up. I'm going to cut that off, and we are going to some launch replays now.
Are you sure?
And that was our first replay. That launch taking place right on time at 7:42 and 41 seconds GMT, 12:42 and 41 seconds in Baikonur. We should have 4 replays coming to you this morning. And that was replay 2. Again, we're expecting 4 of these launch replays for you this morning. It was a very smooth 8-minute and 49-second ride uphill. All 3 stages performing as expected, delivering Soyuz to its initial orbit. And 3 down, 1 more to go for launch replay. Again, launch took place right on time at 7:42 and 41 seconds GMT, 12:42 and 41 seconds out there in Baikonur. A flawless ride to orbit. The crew continuing to orbit the Earth this time. And here's our 4th and final replay. All right, and so that was our final launch replay. So we are going to bring a close to our launch coverage. At this time, the crew continuing their ride uphill. They're about 7 minutes away from their first major burn to start catching up with the International Space Station. And as long as everything goes well with this and the following burns, we're looking at a docking just about 2 hours and 52 minutes from now. And so run through our continuing coverage for you real quick. And so we'll go off the air for a little bit. We'll be back for docking coverage, all of these times Central U.S. time at 5:15 a.m. And we expect docking at about 6:07 a.m. Central time, or 11:07 a.m. or 11:07 GMT. Following that, we'll have a video file with all of the best launch feeds, giving you some replays while we wait for the hatch opening. We'll come back live in the air at 7:30 a.m. Central. We're tracking to a hatch opening right around 8 a.m. Central time. And then we'll wrap up the day with one final video file giving you the highlights from everything docking, hatch opening, everything that unfolded today, delivering 3 new crew members to the space station. So that'll do it for right now. Keep sending in those questions using the hashtag AskNASA. We'll get through a whole bunch more once we get to our rendezvous and docking show. But I do want to thank you for tuning in, staying up late or waking up early to catch 3 crew members flying to the International Space Station. We'll be back in just a little while to show you docking live as we get ready to increase the population on station from 7 all the way up to 10. So a lot more exciting stuff still to come. So one more time, thank you for tuning in. We'll be back in just a couple hours. And this is Mission Control Houston.
I have a feather. In my right hand, a hammer. And I guess one of the reasons we got here today was because of a gentleman named Galileo a long time ago, who made a rather significant discovery about falling objects in gravity fields. And we thought that where would be a better place to confirm his findings than on the moon. And so we thought we'd try it here for you. The feather happens to be appropriately a falcon feather.